Hello, and welcome to mentorDINO. I'm your host, Caitlin Rossier. I am an architect and founder of mentorDINO. I firmly believe that architecture, engineering, and construction professionals can achieve true success by embracing human skills as their guiding principle. So each week, I interview amazing professionals in and around the AEC industry as a way to share stories, inspiration, and advice for others finding their own unique career path. Thank you to all of our current subscribers, and if you're new, we'd love to have you join our community. So if you like this episode, please do me a favor and hit subscribe, like, or leave a comment below. It really helps others be able to discover this resource and support them on their own career journey. So let's dive in. I really hope you enjoy this conversation. Welcome to the mentorDINO podcast. I would like to welcome Nancy Kohout, Principal Mechanical Engineer at Smith Group in Chicago. Thank you so much, Nancy, for taking the time to speak with me today.
Well, thanks for having me, Caitlin.
So let's start out with my loaded question. Do you mind telling my listeners a little bit more about yourself, your experience in education to kind of where you are today?
Sure, happy to. So let's see. I have 28 years in the industry as a mechanical engineer, and I like to describe myself as an architectural engineer because otherwise people think I'm like designing car engines. But my degree is in mechanical engineering, so I could be designing car engines. I just went down a path of designing HVAC for buildings. I went to Ohio State University, have my undergrad in Bachelor's of Science in Mechanical Engineering. I had a couple internships in college. One was at a controls contractor. I worked there long enough to realize I didn't want to be a contractor and that I studied hard to be an engineer and I wanted to be in design. I wanted to work at a place where when I asked questions of why something was done a certain way, I was surrounded by people who would know the answer to that. And I didn't really get that in the contracting world. And so actually this particular controls contractor called on many design engineers as their clients. And I found that list of design engineers. And the next summer, I sent my resume to all of them and got an internship at a consulting engineering firm in downtown Chicago. So I worked as an intern there before my last year of college, and then they offered me a full-time job. And then I worked there for 23 years. So a really long time. I met my husband there. I had 4 children over the course of that 23 years. And then it became apparent to me that the firm was likely going to sell or something because they didn't have really good succession planning. For who was going to take over the partners who were approaching retirement. And when I realized that, my lifelong goal had been to become a partner or a principal. And I just sort of realized, well, if they sell to a big organization, I'm not going to have that opportunity. And so I knew it was my time to look into other options. And so that was about 6.5 years ago. I interviewed with another consulting engineering firm, and I thought that that's where I was probably going to go. But I had a headhunter reach out to me from Smith Group, which is an architect and engineering firm. And I thought, well, before I quit my job of 23 years, I should just see about this other option. And I walked into our offices in downtown Chicago, and they were light and bright, and they had a view of the Chicago River, and they were paperless. So there were rolls and rolls of drawings piled up everywhere. And there were no assigned seats. Like even the office director didn't have an office. He floated around among the practitioners. And the idea of all of that was really exciting to me. Even though I had worked my whole career to the point of having an office, I loved the idea of this sort of collaborative workspace where you could kind of sit where it made sense. And I just envisioned myself there, and it ended up just being the better opportunity for me. And so I've been at Smith Group for 6.5 years. I came from the world of consulting engineers to in-house integrated architect and engineering firm. I like to say I crawled out of a dark cave into the light, both literally and figuratively, because truly there was more light in our office, but also I love being surrounded by the creativity and expertise of people with um, different niche knowledge. And all of a sudden, the coordination with an architect went from being like, they've changed everything again, to, oh, this is my friend that sits next to me. And she really wants there to be a high ceiling here. And I'm going to try to rework this ductwork to make her vision work because I care about her, which was so different than a client asking me to iterate.
Yeah, and I came before I joined Smith Group, I came from an architecture only firm. So
Okay.
even being on the design side and coming in to an AE integrated firm, having like when you're talking about your experiences and joining from the mechanical side coming in, I had very similar experiences coming on this side. Is now I get to be sitting next to those technical engineers and I can work with them. I see who's drawing the drawings. I can actively coordinate them with more ease,
Yeah.
but
I agree.
just people and knowing people and who they are, because when it's a consultant, that relationship building takes a lot longer. But sometimes when you're integrated, it's, hey, I've been sitting next to you for years and now we finally get to work on the same project together. And you can be excited to work on it and not have to spend that time learning about each other. That
I
makes
think there's
sense.
some other things. I do think as an outside consult, like you can build a rapport where you collaborate really well. But again, there's still a fixed line in your fee.
Mm-hmm.
So like if you look at an integrated firm, you can be like, you know what? We would rather spend some of our resources to iterate on the engineering side a few more times to get the aesthetic that we want, and we're all a team. So our
Mm-hmm.
success happens together. If we want to push a little more fee that way because we think that provides value holistically to the client and the project, that's really different than when those are two separate organizations, profit and
Yeah.
loss, etc. So it's just very different. And I feel like I really love being a part of an integrated firm. I feel like it would be hard for me to go back to
Back.
only engineering.
Yeah. Now, did your husband stay with the previous firm?
Oh, he left. He only worked at that firm for like 3.5 years. So
And then he's like, bye, you're crazy.
he went somewhere else, kind of on the owner side, before we even got married. So
Ah, okay.
I stayed there a long time.
Well, I want to back up a little bit more into that history before we move on. I know you mentioned that a lot of people think when you say mechanical engineering that you design cars. So, for somebody looking to study mechanical engineering, what when are those decisions made in college? Do you have one big track and you pick like building HVAC design versus cars? Like what how is that process?
Yeah, those are good questions, Caitlin. I would say it depends on the school. There are whole schools that are really architectural engineering based,
Mhm.
where you're learning to read structural drawings and architectural drawings and do load calculations. And then you might pick sort of a specialty at the end where you're like, I'm going to go mechanical, electrical. With a mechanical engineering degree, a broad mechanical engineering degree, you could do anything. Like there is anything that exists that has moving parts of some sort has a mechanical engineer behind it. So HVAC design is sort of what I would call like a systems design. So
Mhm.
we're taking pieces of equipment designed by others and we're putting them together in a holistic system. We could, as a mechanical engineer, you could also be designing that equipment. And so I will say I didn't really ever pick a specialty. I mean, it was like my job taught me how to apply that broad knowledge base to the HVAC world. One way in which an architectural engineer might be ahead is they understand better, how to read structural drawings and stuff. Like I didn't get any formal education on that. I learned by doing.
Mhm.
Um, but I don't think that you have to know exactly what you want to do in that degree, because the same principles that make you be someone who'd be good at mechanical engineering can lend themselves to any different path that mechanical engineers go into. So
Yeah. And then is there any overlap with plumbing? Like I know for civil and structural engineers, you kind of do
Mhm.
that same education. You start to pivot, and I have in conversations, plumbing and mechanical tend to sometimes overlap, and then plumbing is almost like its own specialty niche.
That's right. I think it is. The the plumbing engineers, the ones that are not plumbing designers, typically have a mechanical engineering degree. It
Okay.
could maybe they could have some other kind of more
Hmm.
broad engineering degree, but typically they would have a mechanical engineering degree.
Yeah. I was just
Yeah,
curious on
good
all the different
question.
avenues. I know for an architect, you pretty much have to like know you want to be an architect, and then you could go into like urban or specialty like
Yeah,
healthcare, higher ed, but it's like kind of more focused.
yeah. I
Um,
would say as specialized as it gets with an engineering degree for what we do in our industry would be an architectural engineering degree with an HVAC specialty.
gotcha. Okay. Now I know. And then the licensure part, how does that work for you guys on the mechanical side?
So, basically, you need a Bachelor of Science of Mechanical Engineering from an accredited university. And then you need to take your engineering training exam. You can take that while you're still in college, and you should take it while you're still in college because it's like all the math and things that you forget later. I took mine 2 years out of college, and it was hard. I managed to pass it, but I wished I would have taken it in college because you probably wouldn't even need to study at all if you took it while you're still in college. And then you need to work for 4 years under degree, PE. And then you need to take another exam called a professional engineering exam in your subject matter that you choose, which that may have evolved. I've had my PE for like 25 years, so I think there's some other, there might be architectural engineering now. I think when I took it, they didn't have
Mm-hmm.
that. So you would have had to take mechanical engineering. But anyway, so you pass that test and then you get your professional engineering license. You do not need to have a master's degree. I think a master's degree might give you 1 year of working credit of those 4 years that you need for your PE. Um, and typically, a master's in mechanical engineering is very niche expertise. Like it
Mm,
might be like how to design that equipment or something. Um, so,
yeah.
I mean, you can definitely do it, and they exist out there, but it's not a requirement. I feel like architects and structural engineers are more likely to get their masters.
Yeah. Because a lot of ours, it depends if we can sit for our license. If you can go to like a 5 year bachelor's
That's
or
right.
a bachelor's plus
We don't have
master's. So,
We don't have that, but I also would say it typically takes 5 years to get an engineering degree, even if it's not officially that. So, in the end, they get you one way or another.
yeah. And then switching back over to the work side, since I did want to hit on the education for my own curiosity's sake.
Yeah.
You had mentioned wanting to take a leadership position at your first firm that you were with, and then switching over to Smith Group, which is a large firm. How did you find leadership opportunities in that way, switching your career into a big firm?
I um I feel like I'm a natural leader. I mean, that is my personality to jump in and figure out how we can make something better. And I feel like working at a larger firm just made a much broader opportunity to impact. So at Smith Group, we had 20 offices and 8 offices with engineers in them. And I would just say I hit the ground running. My first 23 years of my career, what I did was I designed a ton of buildings. I designed them, they got built, I took them through construction, I learned what I did wrong, I fixed my own mistakes, I fixed the mistakes of the engineers who went on to other jobs. And I just got this huge, what is the Malcolm Gladwell book say, like 10,000 hours? I got,
Mm-hmm.
100,000 hours or whatever that works out to be of just doing the work. And so that became this really broad knowledge base to draw from as I, like it just built my confidence and my expertise. And so then when I came to Smith Group, I really had a chance to maybe like fly a little more,
Mm-hmm.
because I was very much, I want to say, heads down, just cranking out work in the beginning of my career. And then that just made me really good at solving problems and fixing things and knowing what to worry about. But then Smith Group valued a little bit more the opportunities for thought leadership, outside involvement. I realized that even though I just spent the first 20 years just doing so much work, I was a leader of teams and a leader of
Mm-hmm.
people. And I became really good at that by just doing it so much. And then I started to realize that that was really a passion of mine, like helping people live their strengths, like either positioning them to do what they're great at or helping them achieve their full potential. Just leading teams, finding the good in people, helping them um, improve on the areas that they needed to. And it's actually was like a really good fit for a mother too, because like those same skills that allow me to raise 4 children and be a good parent, I think apply to the workplace to help grow and build successful engineers, and
Yeah.
just helping people collaborate. Um, so yeah, I guess at Smith Group, I feel like I just got more opportunity to fly, like more opportunity to lead, more opportunity to impact, and I really embraced it. And it was just a great chance for me. In addition, I feel like I was a little bit of a strategic hire in the Chicago office. So it's not like we hired me because I had a whole bunch of work to do. We hired me
Mm-hmm.
because I was the right person for that role. And so in the beginning of my work, I didn't really have enough mechanical engineering work to lead. And so always focused on, performance. I sort of learned to collaborate with other offices, step in and help them out where they needed help, make sure that I had billable work to do. But in doing so, I built all these relationships of trust and collaboration that have served me so well ever since, even when I had more work to do in my own office. That sort of collaboration just like makes us better as a firm, and it made me have a pool of people I could count on because they could count on me when they needed help.
Yeah. So how many mechanical engineers is Chicago up to now?
That's a good question. I think 10. I don't know. We have 2 offers and maybe a third going out. So, and that's just HVAC. I also
Yeah.
kind of oversee plumbing and fire protection to some degree, which is another 4 engineers. So 14 or something like that, and
Yeah.
growing.
And guiding the team. So
Yeah.
then are you theoretically like the mechanical studio lead for that
Discipline
position?
lead.
Discipline lead?
Yeah. So
So
work across all different studios.
is there a particular, like if somebody's striving for a discipline lead role, what does that mean?
Well, that's interesting that you asked that, Caitlin, because I think in some people view a discipline lead as a technical leader of sort of that niche expertise, but also a discipline leader. And it depends on the firm and how they're structured. But
Mm-hmm.
in our firm, the discipline leaders also doing staffing, determining who works on what projects, um, and they're also doing coaching and mentoring. So that sort of leadership of people is really important. And a lot of times you don't get the sort of really strong technical leader and really strong people leader. Sometimes that's not the same person. So I think that role varies a little bit from one office to another or one firm to another, what's expected of that role. I think self awareness is key. Understand what you're good at and understand what someone else might be better at. I would say I'm sort of a Jill of all trades, as we call it. Um, I work across many different studios, project typologies. I would say I have a broad knowledge base,
Mm-hmm.
not necessarily super deep in niche things, but I'm a connector and a collaborator, and I know who does have a really deep knowledge base in particular subject areas. Thinking laboratory, science and tech,
Yeah.
some things like that that are very specific. So I surround myself and reach out for expertise as needed.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite project type since you kind of dabble in a bunch?
Um, I would say for the work that Smith Group does, I really love science and technology because it's very interesting, complex. It's often very driven by engineering. But
Hmm.
at the same time, I think I'm I'm nimble. I can adjust, and I think I'm good at scaling my effort or the level of documentation for the project type. And so I find myself a lot of times working on things more like workplace, which might be a little less complex on the engineering side. And so it requires the scaling of effort and an eye towards profitability and understanding what needs to be documented. So I sometimes find myself doing things like that because I'm good at adjusting to what the project requires
Yeah, that scope and speed depending on the
and
time it
level of
takes. Like,
depth. And
hmm.
yeah. So, I guess I like doing work that helps grow people and makes interesting projects and is challenging to me. I would also just say I have like a huge passion for decarbonization. I've brought 4 children into this world. I want to help um, make our infrastructure not reliant on fossil fuels. And so that's something I care a lot about. Again, that doesn't really land in any one type of building or campus, but um, the same laws of physics apply. And
Hmm.
I really want to help affect change in that arena. And I feel like we need really smart architects and engineers and scientists to get us out of our climate change pickle.
Pickle's a good way to put it. But um, do you have any, before we move off kind of leadership items, do you have any advice for new leaders, whether they're engineering or architectural, for learning to lead teams and
Mhm.
managing their time differently, delegation, managing up and down a lot of the times
Oh
at
my
that
gosh,
point?
there's so much to say on all of this.
So much, but those are kind of
Okay,
the big ones.
I'll try to be concise. Okay, so I would say as a leader, it's really important to understand your own style. Everyone's different. You're not going to be like, you might have someone that you loved how they led you, but like you're your own person. So understand what your style is. I think my style is very open, encouraging, very vulnerable. I'm very comfortable sharing like the things I'm not good at or
Hmm.
what I'm still trying to improve. Just being a real person. Everybody, like leaders, are real people too. So we're all a work in progress. And I think that also helps foster a safe environment for people to be able to raise their hand and be like, I don't really understand this. I need some help here. If you act perfect and you act like there's no flaws that you have as a leader, you're not going to make it a safe place for other people to be able to reveal and improve upon what their own struggles are. So I think that's really important to me, like being vulnerable, being real, creating a safe culture. Um, the day comes as you rise to leadership where you cannot do everything and you cannot be perfect, and you have to prioritize what requires your time and what you can give away. And the things that you give away, you have to leave time to tweak them and have them
Hmm.
fine tuned to be perfect. And you should basically be giving away anything that doesn't require you. Um, and then helping finish it after you delegate it, right? Making sure it's where it needs to be. Allowing your team to reach and sort of push themselves outside their comfort zone, because that's what grows people. Um, Not being afraid to step back in and help fix the stuff that didn't stick to the wall, but rather slid down and needs your help. Um, Being a team player, like when something goes wrong on a project, it's a project team. Um, and as a leader, if you're responsible for that thing, it's your problem. You jump in, you help your team, you work together. Everyone makes mistakes, it's normal. Not being overly critical, helping learn from what didn't go well, I think is important. Um, there's a day, and this is not for everybody, but anyone who goes to a leadership role, there's a moment when you kind of make a leap from individual contributor, I do this thing, I control all these things, to leader, where you're deciding who can do what and how you can get the job done and what needs your help. And that's a leap to be made in anyone's career. And it's really normal to struggle with that, to struggle to let go, to struggle with perfectionism, and it's really important to have self-awareness of like sort of what your flaws might be in that area. Like, are you micromanaging? Are you being too controlling? Are you giving people a chance to flourish? Are you talking too much and not listening enough? Like that's an awareness thing I have of myself, is really trying to draw out like the introverts in the room and get their point of view, because they're usually the smartest. They have the best things to say. They're just inside percolating. So like those
Yeah.
kinds of things.
You just got to pull the ideas out.
Yeah. And as far as managing up, I think I have a whole presentation on managing up, but it's very much about having empathy for who you're working with. And it's not that too different than from managing down. It's understanding the qualities of the person that you're working with, understanding what drives them, being tolerant for what their flaws are, helping be a team with them, not being afraid to pick up the phone when things are going bad, that email tone is escalating. Um,
Mm-hmm.
as a doer, you think, oh, my manager does nothing. Well, they do a lot of things. They're figuring out what everyone should do, which is a whole job in itself, right? So
Yeah.
having empathy for what's on their plate, just like you want them to have empathy for what's on your plate. So much comes down to communication, collaboration, um, the ability to build a bridge if things aren't going well, the ability to be accountable for your own flaws, the ability to kind of right the ship when things aren't going well. And, the truth is, it's the answer is always something in the middle, right? There's two
Mm-hmm.
sides to the story. The answer is always something in the middle. So to lower your pride and just try to like do something for the good of the team to make things better, like those are just things that make a good leader, in my opinion.
Yeah. It's not always black and white. So many things are
Never black
shades
and
of
white.
gray.
And I'm an engineer. It's never black and white.
But I know I struggled the first time I took over a leadership role in a project. I struggled a lot with delegation. I
Yeah,
didn't
normal. Very
I didn't
normal.
understand delegation. I thought it was like an all or nothing thing. And I ended up hurting my team because I didn't delegate to them early enough to have that time to iterate, think through, be able to fix, mend, and I hindered the whole team. And
Well, and
so,
there's like with delegation, there's like a whole thing, which is this. You have to figure out what you're delegating in the beginning. The things that you're doing can come later. The things
mhm,
that someone needs from you and the things that you need from someone have to go first.
yep.
Because no one loves that manager that sits on something for 7 days and then tells you the day before it's due that they need your help, right? And so it's this whole parallel path thing where you're starting to understand, oh, I need to communicate the things I need from other people or the things that they need from me
Yep.
first. And that's like a process. You learn that. Like you
Yeah.
start your life as a linear individual contributor. First, I do this, then I do this. In management, you have to understand, okay, who needs something from me? Who does someone need? Who do I need something from? I got to ask for that first.
Yeah.
And then I'll get to the things that only I can do. And what are the things that only you can do? Messy things that require a whole bunch of history, things that need like 10 different inputs, you know,
Yeah.
hard to give away things.
Yeah. I'm always teaching my young architects on projects or the people I coach. It's, hey, always start with what do you need to do first that affects others so they can get something done? Or if you don't even know it, like I always like teaching if you are redesigning a corner of a building, go tell your engineering team, I'm redesigning this whole
Yes,
area. Just stay
FYI.
clear.
Yeah.
Because if you don't tell them, that's the first spot that's going to get
Yeah.
done.
Yeah.
That's just the nature of things.
Again,
But
communication.
exactly. Were there any, I know since you were kind of on the consulting side and now in house, are there any particular communication strategies that worked in one sense or another?
Um, well, I think uh, I feel generationally our forms of communication have changed, and not that there's one right way or one wrong way, but I think it's really important to understand the preferred communication style of who you're communicating with. So, I have daughters who are 21 and 23, and like I would never just pick up the cell phone and call them. I know to text them first and be like, "Can I call you?" Because
Hmm.
that is what's polite culturally for their generation. But I am 51 years old. Like if I was going to, call my husband who's about to turn 60, like I would just pick up the phone. We talk real time. That's the world
Yeah.
that we're from, right? And so just sort of adjusting to the communication styles of who you're dealing with, I think is important. That's showing adaptability and respect for who you're interacting with. I think as engineers, we typically have more projects. We spend
Hmm.
less time on a project and we have more projects simultaneously. So, as an architect, you were working to be respectful of your engineers rather than sending them like PDF attachments of beautiful colored schedules. Send them a calendar invite that shows up on their calendar that tells them what they need to know in the thing, right? So it's like starting to understand how best to communicate to your team for success. Um, Make it easy. That's a skill I learned at my consulting firm. Like I would manage the team of engineers, and I would and they would be like, "No one told me." And then I would be like, "Well, let's see. Let's look on your calendar. Oh, geez, look, here it is right here. You got an invite. And in this invite, it told you exactly what to do." You know, Over communicate. Give
Hmm.
someone no reason to explain why they didn't know what they needed to do. And if the what you're doing isn't working, then adjust,
Yeah.
right? Like don't be afraid to adjust. Like don't hunker down and be like, I sent you a PDF 7 weeks ago and in page 72 it said this. Like obviously if they didn't hear it, you need to adjust how you're sending your message.
Yeah. I would just ask half the time. It's, hey, how do you prefer
Hmm.
information? Are you in construction right now and you're getting Procore emails all day long that you're not going to see an email or it can get
Right.
buried? Then, okay, is Teams better? Should I
Yep.
pick up the phone and call you? Can I just call you and leave you a message? Is that fine? And just learning people. I think it all
Yep.
goes back to knowing everybody.
And not being afraid to get input, like as a leader getting input, like I'm always getting input. And it was funny, I was reading a whole thing about introverts versus extroverts, and it's like extroverts are always like, how do you feel? It's so annoying to introverts, like why don't you tell me how I feel all the time, right? And
I'm fine.
I'm like that's me. I'm always like, how is everybody feeling, and they're like, why do you keep asking me how I'm feeling, Nancy? So it's just awareness.
Yeah, it's like, I'm fine. I'm just getting my work done. I
Yeah,
just like
leave me
being quiet.
alone.
Um, Switching over to women in engineering side, do you have any advice for women pursuing a career in STEM?
um I would just say like the the working world of HVAC engineers has evolved greatly in my 28 years. When I first joined ASHRAE, my professional society, like you could count the women in the room probably on one hand at any meeting. And now I'm leading a whole group of women in ASHRAE in Chicago, and furthermore, chairing a national conference for women in ASHRAE. And so it's really exciting. There's more of them, and I realize at my stage of career, like I want to be the leader I wish I had earlier in my career. So I would just say, as a woman in a technical field, in particular, a field where a lot of times you might be the only person in the room that looks like you. Um, Believe in yourself, have confidence, take a seat at the actual table. If you're involved in the meeting, don't defer
Hmm.
and sit in the second row. If you're leading the meeting, get a seat at that table. Um, I don't want to take away inherent qualities that I think are good about women sometimes. It's sort of like getting feedback and whatever. But at the same time, I think it's important to stick up for yourself and um, see other women as people with whom you can collaborate. Look for a mentor, a sponsor in your organization. Uh, and just got to make your voice heard because your unique approach and consideration provides value to a team. You're a little different. We need different is good because a design team does best with different inputs.
Yeah. And even I've noticed a difference, and I'm just a decade into my career post college, and I've been on jobs where I am the only female, regardless, architect, engineer, contractor, and even seeing women in the trades, seeing women
You're,
engineers that I'm working with. I'm like, oh, I'm working with a senior female mechanical engineer. I'm like,
yeah,
this is fantastic. The last 8 jobs I was on, it was always just the old
yeah,
white guy, and
yeah.
that's who it is. So it's refreshing to see that change, even just in the 10 years I've been here, let alone I can't imagine what it's been like for you and other senior professionals
I
in
mean,
your
it's great,
career.
but I also feel like some of my biggest advocates in my career have been that old white guy.
Hmm.
So, like, I think it's like allyship to,
Yeah.
understanding who really is in your corner. Um, and also, I think recognizing that a lot of times people are trying their best and they're still learning, right? So, not being overly critical on someone who, you know, I don't know, calls you honey or something, like
Yeah.
looking at their generation, having some tolerance for where they come from, right?
Hmm.
Or maybe gently correcting them or teasing them. Like one thing I learned to do is whenever a man would call me some kind of diminutive, like honey or sweetie, I'd call him it right back and
Heck.
smile. I had to find my way to be kind and point things out in a way that they could still hold their head high but also hear me.
Yeah. Humor is always a great way
Yeah.
to
Mhm.
get it in there. You mentioned ASHRAE. How did you get involved with ASHRAE? What all does that organization do?
Okay, so ASHRAE is the American Society of Heating, Refrigerating, and Air Conditioning Engineers. I joined very early in my career, like right when I started my job. And I was involved for about 8 years. And then I had little kids, and my boss at the time was kind of like, oh, who cares about ASHRAE? And like my plate was full, and I sort of stepped away from it. And I regret that. I think professional society is really important for opportunities in your career. When I was coming to Smith Group, my future boss was like, "Oh, are you a member of ASHRAE?" And I was like, "Join
No,
ASHRAE."
I
Yes, I am.
am.
And like I said, because I felt like Smith Group valued and invested in things like organization, involvement in professional society, I got involved. And I found that and it was a pretty young group of leadership in my local chapter, but I think they were excited to have my involvement. And I quickly I started out just kind of chairing the women in ASHRAE and the diversity in ASHRAE committee, and then quickly got involved in local leadership. So now I'm the treasurer. I'll be vice president and then president in the next year and 2 years. But then with that involvement, we had a local chapter meeting where we brought in a distinguished lecturer, a woman who spoke on being human in a technical world. She did a great presentation. I became friends with her. We talked about how we were inspired by the AIA Women's Leadership Summit, and we
Hmm.
we were like, we should do this at ASHRAE. Now, I wasn't involved at the society level, which is like the national level. I was involved at the local level, but she was involved at the society level. And so we pitched it to the society, and they were kind of like, why do you need this? And it was a real, let's just say, not super progressive group of people in talking about diversity. And it was funny because I was trying to figure out my way to have them hear me. And so at one point, I kind of said, you know what? You're right. Maybe ASHRAE isn't ready for this. Well, that was a challenge that they wanted to rise to. And
Hmm.
oddly enough, it was actually the two men in the meeting who were like, no, I think we do need this. So they kind of were advocates for it. And then we got the society to support it. And so it's happening in September. We're really excited. And as I said, inspired by the AIA, we're doing our own thing with ASHRAE.
Yeah. You should peek into the AIA Leadership Summit because it's going to be in Chicago this year, so it's right in your
I know.
backyard.
And actually, it's like right around the time of this one. So I'll have to double
Just go
check the
back to
time.
back and take notes
Yeah. And
because
theirs has evolved. I mean, they've come quite a way.
so
I've been kind of
much.
sort of watching the content. I hope I hope for ASHRAE's to be similar. So, but first we have to have this one be a success. And
Yeah.
ASHRAE has 55,000 members, of which about 6,000 are women. So in order to get 250 of those women, I mean, I need like 5% of the total national membership to show up. I mean, men are, of
Hmm.
course, invited too. It's women and allies. It's anyone that's for women in our industry. So it'll be really interesting. Fingers crossed it goes well. It's been great
Yeah.
to be a part of planning it.
Yeah, because I know the Women's Leadership Summit was biannually, and they just recently switched to annually. I was at the one in Boston this past year. It
Cool.
was over 1,000 people, and the last one I went to was, I think it was in 2017 when it was in DC, and just it was still a bigger scale of a conference even in DC, but like Boston was just like, oh my goodness. But now the conversations is we need more men to be coming to these
Yeah.
events,
Yep.
to
Yep.
see them and have it in a different context. There was only a few, which I don't want to like not have space for women to enjoy their own conference. But again,
Right.
like having those advocates to speak not for you, but speak of you when you're not in the room is always helpful.
Absolutely.
And so
Well,
being able to see.
that's like a big thing that I've been saying to people. Like, one, invest in yourself. If your firm won't pay for you to do something like that, it's valuable to you. But two, talk is cheap. We have a lot of
Mhm.
talk about DEI. It's happening everywhere. But talk is cheap. What are you doing? How are you
Yeah.
advocating? That's like a big sort of theme that I have lately. Um, and I was super excited to get Smith Group to sponsor this conference because it just makes me proud to have their name up there, and also to feel supported in my
Hmm.
efforts.
Yeah. And action speaks louder than words sometimes.
Yep.
So, but congratulations on getting that started. I'll have to touch base with you in the fall to see how it went.
Yeah.
Um, but sticking with the leadership part, I know you are also currently part of the board of directors at Smith Group. Do you have any advice for women getting a part of that level of an organization? Like what happens on a board side?
Yeah, it was really has been a great opportunity to understand how a company works, and how we make our money, and how we make strategic decisions for the firm. It's been great to have the opportunity to be a part of that. I think in the very beginning, I probably had a little bit of imposter syndrome. Like, I would talk in the board meeting and then I would kind of be like, should I have said that? And then I kind of had to give myself my own little pitch that said, you know what? They asked you to be a part of this because they chose you for who you are. So make your voice heard, make your perspective known. If they didn't want that, then they wouldn't have asked you to be a part of it. So I had to give myself that little pep talk in the beginning. But quickly I became close and connected with the various members of the board, and we became this sort of cohesive team. And during my time on the board, we got our first woman managing partner of Smith Group, 170-year-old firm. So that was a really exciting milestone, to really have a front row seat for. So that was really exciting. I just think it was a great opportunity to be a part of. And I think the more people we have in our firm that get a chance to rotate through that, the better we'll be as a firm, because it's like you can't unlearn that things that you learn getting a front row seat in how a company is run and organized and how decisions are made. So it's been a great opportunity to have.
Yeah. So do the board, like, since I know a little bit more of Smith Group structure, does the board members inform the three managing partners on moves, or is the managing partners coming to the board? Like, what's that communication? that
I mean,
happens.
the managing partners lead the firm day to day, and they're empowered to make decisions day to day. The board is a representative group that represents the shareholders of the organization. So we have like 200 some principals and vice presidents in our organization who are owners, and the board is the voice that represents them. So when you sit as a board, you're not representing yourself. You're representing a whole group of people, because you can't have you're not going to make those kinds of decisions with 300 people,
Yeah.
but you have a job to do, and it's to represent more than your own point of view. It's what's best for the firm. It's what's best for the owners of the firm. So the company is led by the managing partners. The day-to-day decisions are made by the managing partners. The shareholder agreement requires approval by a board for certain decisions. And so that's the role of the board. The board is primarily helping make decisions to represent the shareholders. And then there are certain things that have to be voted upon by the entire group of the shareholders. And one of the things that is like swearing in the new board, because the board changes from year to year. And so that's a vote by the shareholders. So, and there are some other things that, the shareholder agreement, like any
Hmm.
certain changes have to be approved by the board. So the board represents the owners.
Yeah. No,
That's
that
not,
makes
that's as best I can roll it up.
no, that makes a lot of sense because it's once you once you're further away you get from those certain levels, sometimes it's hard to have that transparency all the way down to all those communications because again, you don't want to like bring 1400 of us all together
Right.
in a meeting
To
like
decide a thing.
yeah,
Right.
it's
But I
that.
mean, communication is really important too, though, like
Mhm.
to everyone, right? It's important to know, like, with lack of communication, people speculate, and
Yeah.
speculation is is never good, because who knows what direction that's going to go in, right? So communication is key.
Yeah, because I know everybody else usually gets information from the managing partners because they are the voice and the
Yeah.
face of the firm.
And
So
that's
that's why
their, yeah,
that's their role.
and they do funnel. I mean, they should be the ones funneling. But as a
Yeah.
board member, you're also representing the shareholders, and, um, within the limits of whatever it is that you have purview over, like, if it's not something that is confidential,
Hmm.
then you might be a part of sort of sharing, what direction we're going or why or whatever.
Yeah.
So it's a delicate line to understand, what is for public consumption and what is, being decided and confidential.
Yeah, definitely. And I always like wrapping up my podcast with this final question, and it's what advice do you have for young professionals just starting their career?
So for young professionals just starting their careers, well, I have actually some in my home. I have a daughter just starting her first full-time job next month. Um, I would I guess one thing I would say that I never really formally adopted myself that I think could provide great value is um, find mentors, find sponsors, be connected with people further along in their career than yourself. Um, Find your cohort, whether that's your peer, find your peers that can help connect and support you, whether that's your professional society, that sort of connectivity of other professionals in the same business as you, and then just definitely find a mentor, like, or many mentors, like get input, get help to figure out your path. I feel like if I had had that, I might have, I don't know, made changes earlier in my career, because I really feel like the last 6.5 years has been a great opportunity for me. And I wonder what it could have been if maybe I had tried something different a little sooner. At
Hmm.
the same time, I feel like all that experience before then makes me qualified and capable to do what I'm doing now. So who knows?
Yeah. You can always say what if to
Yeah.
something
Oh, yeah.
or how it changed. Like, what if you
Seems like
didn't
things are work.
leave and go
Yeah.
to Smith Group? What if you stayed and
Yeah.
who knows what would happen to the other firm?
I mean, I feel like things are working out pretty well. So it's a path that's reasonable. One thing we do in Chicago is we have this thing called principal pathways, where we sort of people share their career path. And one thing I could say is that um, most people have a pretty circuitous path. Like they've done lots of different things and then they landed. We all kind of landed up in the same spot. So I think see value in the path that you take, see what it taught you, figure out what you're missing, figure out how you can get developing experiences to improve upon the experiences that you haven't had. And a mentor can help with that. So if I had to roll it up to one thing, I would say look for mentors.
Yeah.
And
And
hi to the dog.
and what?
Hi to the dog. The dog.
And I know I've actually stumbled upon the Principal Pathways presentations because I know they were recorded. I haven't looked them up recently to find them on SharePoint, but I think I found them like when COVID and I was like slow. And so I was listening to all these different stories of
It's
principals.
so interesting, isn't it?
And it's fascinating. Just that's why I do this podcast and just seeing all the different career paths people can go. It's not a linear path. You
At
never
all.
know where something's going to take you, or sometimes you have to take a leap and do something different for a change. And sometimes it's for amazing things. Like you said, you felt like you could fly now.
Yes.
And I've had other conversations where it's a change and it's like, oh, nope, just kidding. Don't like
Oh,
that.
that
And
wasn't great.
and pivot. But regardless, you learn and it's
Yeah.
okay and you'll grow and you'll be fine.
Yeah.
But no. And if anybody wants to get a hold of you, has any questions, wants to learn more about the Women in Engineering ASHRAE event, what's the best way they can get a hold of you or get involved?
Well, I like to make the joke that engineering is my part-time job and my full-time job is LinkedIn. Yeah, if you want to connect with me in any way, I'm on LinkedIn, Nancy Kohout, Smith Group. I'm very active. I'm happy to connect. I believe in collaboration and connectivity. So I think that's the best way to get a hold of me for anybody. And I wish you all luck in your career and find your own path. Figure out who you are. Find your own path.
And I'll leave your LinkedIn handle down below in the show notes, so it should be
Great.
really easy to find you. But
Okay.
thank you so much, Nancy. It was fantastic to speak with you. I know I have seen you all over LinkedIn and Smith Group platforms, so I'm glad we finally got to meet virtually and have a discussion today.
Well, and now we're going to be friends forever.
Exactly.
So
I know I'll be going to you for any advice I have with my team management and cross-checking with things. So,
all right. Thanks.
I hope you enjoyed our discussion today. Learn some advice to take with you and see how our industry is all tied together to create the world around us. Check out the description below for any links or resources we discussed. If you liked the episode, please do me a favor and hit the subscribe button. Give me a thumbs up and leave a comment below. It really helps others be able to discover this resource and support finding that career path that best works for them. If you know someone that has inspired your own career that you'd like me to interview, let me know in the comments below, or you can reach out to me via my website or LinkedIn. I'd be happy to share their story or your own. Thank you again, and I cannot wait for the next career story I get to share with you next week.